My name is Ronalda Tome, and this is Albuquerque, New Mexico. We are on the outskirts of the Bernalillo County, just before you get into Rio Rancho. I grew up in Crown Point, New Mexico, the eastern part of the Navajo Nation. It's 60 miles northeast of Gallup, New Mexico, near Chaco Canyon. My mother went to school in a place called Rehoboth, New Mexico. It was a Christian boarding school. My father went to school in a boarding school in Carson, New Mexico, near Farmington. And I don't know if you've heard stories of the boarding school era and what has happened to American Indians, but back in about 1940s, about 1940s, 1930s, when children were taken away out of their homes and put into boarding schools, and majority of them were left there. They couldn't go home, they couldn't see their parents. My dad had it a lot harder than my mom when she was in boarding school. My dad was stripped, of his name. He was beaten, he was hurt. He couldn't speak Navajo. He was told numerous times that it was only English. I was here in the state of New Mexico, but then I started to really see the racial tensions, and even when I was in high school and we used to play in these border towns, the names you were called because you were Indian, and if you won the game, we had one incident in one of the border towns. We won and beat the team, and my coach told us, "You're gonna run into to the locker room, but you're not gonna have time to get dressed. Just grab your stuff and you got to get to the bus." And we were like, why? We knew there was tension in the audience and from the referees, but when we got into the bus, then she told us to all get on the ground and get on the floor. And so as we were driving out of this community, rocks were being thrown at us, and they were telling us, "Go back to your home, go back." You would hear the "ooh," and all these remarks made, and that's when I started to realize how you were different. Probably in the summertime, I was driving home, and I was on my way home, and I was on the outskirts of Albuquerque, and I noticed a state police officer was following me. And I thought I wasn't doing anything wrong, but then all of a sudden he turns on his lights and he stops me. And so I get my license and my registration, and he comes alongside to my window, and I thought that's what he was going to ask for right away. And he took one look at me and he said, "Oh, another drunken Indian." I go, "What? I'm not drinking." And he told me to get out of the bug, and he did every test in the world to try and prove I was drunk. It was humiliating. I'm going to school, I got this car, I'm doing really great in school, and then this all of a sudden puts you right back in the place where you realize, I'm not changing, I'm not growing. Why is it people see you this way and they're not changing? When I recognized my oldest son was having problems in school, we started to see these patterns of forgetfulness, for not being focused, for being all over the place. Probably around the time he was 7, we finally got him diagnosed, and we found out he was ADHD. When I realized my son had the difficulties that I started to read more about ADHD. I started to find out a little bit more on how to teach him and how to help him. After I was working with before and after school, there was a job opening to work with Jefferson County Schools in Indian education, to be a community liaison, and started to see how services within special ed and education in general, they weren't happening for a majority of our Indian kids. And so I started to see my life as a transformation of, I'm not in a boarding school, I'm not being beaten up, I'm not being told to not speak or say anything, so why am I not doing more? And then when I moved here to Albuquerque, it was almost as if you had to start all over again. It was like that time the officer stopped me. You were making all these successes and you were doing great, and then you come back to Albuquerque to be put right back down on the bottom again. And when people look at you and look at your skin color, they don't look at what you've accomplished or that you're a person. And I saw that within the school system. When I started to work with EPICS, I got to travel to the 23 tribes and conduct these parent workshops on advocacy and IDEA and transition for their kids and help to empower these parents. So then I started to really say to myself, I got to get down to a deeper level with when I was going out to these trainings and learning more about these families. And so when I started to talk in these terms of who they were and where they're going and how they were once great people, I started to see impact and changes started to happen. And then I started to relate it to how they were great warriors. And why aren't we no longer fighting for our children the way we used to long ago? Why are we allowing our children to go into a system that there's no identity for them? They're hurt. So when you talk in those terms to the Native people, they see their impact, they see what's going on, but they do need tools. But I always thought I was going to get involved in education because when I was little in Crown Point, I recall the times we used to go to the dump and we used to get all the old school books that the schools would throw away. And we had a chalkboard in our garage, and then we found these old seats that they threw away. So we made a classroom in our garage, and all the neighborhood kids would come over, so I would teach them. And so I chose special education because of my son, but also because what I'm seeing with my job when I go out to these rural areas where you see children still being tied with duct tape. I had a grandmother who walked into her little Down syndrome child's classroom at 10. She happened to walk in there and he was tied down with duct tape because they couldn't settle him down. Despite not having all of these things that people expect you to have, that as long as you're complete with yourself and you know where you come from and you know why you're here, that is the greatest impact in the world. And I wish a majority of our Indian people knew that. A gentleman, when I was in Boulder, when I was living in Colorado, we were going to this Jewish festival. And as we were walking there, I saw the little, the prayer shawls and all of his little artifacts he brought from Jerusalem. And as I was looking at him, he asked me, he goes, "Are you American Indian?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And he says, and I said, "I'm Navajo." And then he held out his hand to me. And he said, "Give me your hand." And I was shaking, and he held it. He put his hand. "I want to thank you for allowing me to come to your beautiful home." And I was like shocked. And I thought to myself, if other people would greet us that way, the respect that would be bestowed back to us would be, it breaks down a lot of barriers. So I said to myself, that's all we're looking for as Indian people, is to be acknowledged for who we are and respected, because we're great people.